From technological breakthroughs to innovative business strategies, from manufacturing to e-commerce, from telecommunications to the home computer. On World Business Review with Alexander Haig.
Now, Q, why is this so difficult for so many companies?
I think the main thing, Al, is that it's a paradigm change, and it's a cultural change. Technically, you can read the books. It doesn't look that difficult, but when people actually go out and do it, they find that it is very difficult because of the culture working against it. People don't really understand it, and also because it isn't a cookbook. Because every company has to find their own way in this. Each one is a little bit different, and this is the strategic thing that you mentioned, Dan.
Okay, what is the most single important factor, though, when it comes to trying to implement a lean manufacturing operation?
Well, I think it's just like the Army, Al, it's leadership. Mm-hmm. There needs to be someone at the top of this organization that, first of all, can envision what all this is going to look like in the future. Secondly, they have to inspire the people to go along with them, and then they have to give them the training and the tools that they need.
Now, Q, what is Kanban?
Well, Al, literally, Kanban is a Japanese word for cart. But a Kanban system is essentially a very simple and effective production control method. I make a variety of parts here in my little area, and what I do is I set a little bit of each one out on a shelf. And the people who need those parts, the downstream production or the customer, they come in, they take what they want. And I just watch those shelves, and whenever I see the stock going down, I make more of that. And that's all there is to it. The cards are one means of telling me the status of the inventory.
Well, Q, there's another important part of lean manufacturing, which is rapid setup. Can you elaborate on that?
Rapid setup is important in many industries where we make various products on the same equipment. And the equipment has to be changed over or set up each time we run a new product. If it takes, say, 2 hours to do a changeover on a piece of equipment, you can't afford to run that equipment for 20 minutes. You have to run it for perhaps a full day in order to amortize the cost of that setup. And what that ends up doing is producing a huge amount of inventory. Plus, if you have some sort of a defect in that batch, then you have a huge number of defects. So what we do there is we study the setup process itself and see how we can streamline that process. And these are very simple techniques, but typically you can get 80 to 90% of the time out of a setup. And this allows you to produce smaller batches. It makes the setup more consistent.
Now, Q, how does all this impact the end user?
What the end user sees is better quality, better delivery reliability. The stuff is there when you tell them it's going to be there. And in many cases, they may see cost reductions. But on the other hand, when a company goes through and does all of this, effectively they increase their margins. Now, they can either use that increase to decrease their price to the customer, or they can make more profit, or some combination thereof. But typically, the customers get what they want, when they want it, and at better quality and lower price.
Well, Q, how do employees benefit from lean manufacturing?
The great thing about lean, Dan, is that for the employee, it makes work a lot more interesting and a lot more challenging and a lot more fun. Because when we put people in teams inside these work cells, they have complete control over their operation. And we have to give them that control. They coordinate it, they manage it, they solve the problems there, they control their own quality, and they coordinate within themselves and with the outside world. And so it makes manufacturing a lot more interesting and a lot more fun.
Now that leads to an important question. What level of intellectual capital is necessary in order to compete in this marketplace?
Well, if we're talking about competing in the sense of implementing lean manufacturing, you need to understand the systems itself and how the pieces fit together. That's relatively easy. You can read the books. Mm-hmm. The more important piece, though, are the subtleties of it. How does it interact? How does the human equation fit in? And this is where a lot of manufacturers have trouble.
Well, Q, let's look at this from another perspective. What are the most challenging issues or more complex things that a company trying to serve the manufacturer, bring lean manufacturing into the manufacturing industry faces?
I think it's how do we deal, the paradigm, if you will. How do we get a company, an organization, and the people within it from the old paradigm to the new paradigm? And that is something that takes, I think, experience more than anything else. Mm-hmm. There's no textbook on that.
And Q, from what you said, obviously this is not a molded solution for everybody, but how long does it typically take to implement a lean manufacturing strategy in a company?
In most companies, I would say that if management is serious and if they give it the resources, that they can be seeing good results within about 3 months. Mm-hmm. To get a substantially lean company, it's going to take you somewhere between 3 months and perhaps 2 years.
Q, we've been talking a lot about the people issues and the change management and everything. What role does technology play in all of this?
We try to take whatever technology they have and make it a lot leaner. That's step one. Once you understand how to deal with the technology you have, then you can move to the next step and bring in new computer systems, better scheduling systems, maybe new machine tools. But initially, I would prefer to go with whatever they have at the moment and make it work better. Then we bring in the new technology.
Now, you've touched upon this, Q, but once a strategy is in place, what happens in terms of the follow-up that has to follow?
First, we have to get it implemented. And because this is an ongoing strategy, you have to keep at it. In fact, you often see companies that backslide. Mm-hmm. They don't keep up with their training. They don't have managers that keep the culture and the system going.
Was it a step-by-step process?
There are steps, but it's not a cookbook. In some companies, for example, setup is the big problem, so that's step one. In other companies, quality is the big problem, so that becomes step one. In others, it's workflow, and so cellular manufacturing becomes step one.
At this juncture, we ask our guests to give our viewers a picture of what he or she sees coming down the road in the near term in his industry. Now, what would be your prediction for the next year or two?
I think for the next year, Al, that it's an issue or a question of implementing what we already know or we should know. Most of the techniques have been there for a number of years. They've been gestating, but it seems that in many companies that it's all reaching a critical mass now. I think one key point was when Womack invented the term lean manufacturing. It wasn't any different than the Toyota system, as you'd said, Dan, but suddenly it's caught on. And now I think that what we're going to see is it actually being implemented and used.
Now, Dan, what would be your picture?
Well, I agree with Q in that this is something that's been out there gestating for a long time, and we're about now to see the real birth of this real trend. Companies have been struggling with how do they improve their business. We've layered in lots of technology, the internet and other things, and we haven't seen the huge economic returns that people were expecting. Well, that means because we've got to go back to some basics and fundamentals, and lean manufacturing, flow manufacturing, theory of constraints, Six Sigma, these are all things that start letting us use what we've got in place, but with real business objectives.
Very good. Now, unfortunately, once again, the clock tells us we'll have to terminate this extremely interesting and important subject. So I want to take this opportunity, Q, to thank you for your fine contributions today.
Okay. Thank you, Al. It's been a pleasure.
Good. Okay. And as always, Dan, we're indebted to you for your contributions as well.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Until next time, for World Business Review, I'm Alexander Haig.